The president saying, quote, Time magazine wrote a relatively good story about me, but the picture may have been the worst of all time. They disappeared my hair. And then they had something floating on top of my head that looked like a floating crown, but an extremely small one. It was really weird. Yeah. I never liked taking pictures from underneath angles, and neither do I, Mr. President. That's the worst angle. But this is super bad picture, and it deserved to be called out. What are they doing and why?
7 words. Never mess with Donald Trump's hair. That's,
yes.
Yep, 6 words, actually. Unless you're, of course, Jimmy Fallon. Then you could mix it up, but they would never do that to a Democrat. And this is probably one of his greatest achievements.
Yes.
In both terms, and of course they have to step on it by doing this. There are no accidents, Freud once said. It is intentional, Rachel.
And they do it to other conservatives all the time.
Of course, the President of the United States is far too busy hammering out the details of a deal to end a generational conflict in the Middle East to worry about how he looks on some bi-weekly magazine, you would think. But, of course, he posted, Time magazine wrote a relatively good story about me, but the picture may be the worst of all time. He's right. You got to hand it that. It is. It is one of the worst.
I do want to mention briefly that Time magazine cover we talked about yesterday with Donald Trump on the cover. It's a pretty magnificent cover, you would think. Trump says that Time magazine wrote a relatively good story about me, but the picture may be the worst of all time. They reckon they disappeared his hair. They had something floating on top of his head that looked like a floating crown. No. They reckon it was really weird. Boy, he's a little bit vain, isn't he? It's just the sun shining through what there is left of his hair.
On Time magazine's front cover. Let's have a look. They write, the living Israeli hostages held in Gaza have been freed under the first phase of Donald Trump's peace plan alongside a Palestinian prisoner release. The deal may become a signature achievement of Trump's second term, and it could mark a strategic turning point for the Middle East. All sorts of Captain Obvious commentary there. But Concha, Time could not help themselves. They had to run a terrible picture, terrible angle. They are just so petty. They just couldn't say, okay, we're going to put him on the front page and it's going to be a complimentary story for once. He's going to be on the front cover. No, they had to put the most hideous photo they could find.
And I have to imagine he's very unhappy about that because he's somebody who's very, conscious of image. And he's put out some amazing, iconic pictures, thankfully. That this one is not as important as it would have been pre-social media. He's got the fight photo. He's got the mug shot. He's got beautiful inauguration photos. But it is petty. You could say that they at least were one step better than the Nobel Committee, who wouldn't even deign to award him the prize. At least these guys gave him the cover. But yes, I don't think it's a coincidence that they chose that very unflattering photo.